It weighs around 1.5 kilos. It's roughly the size of a small melon. It has the texture of tofu. Our so-called grey matter is in fact pinkish grey in colour. It's made up of 100 billion nerve cells, about the same as the number of trees in the Amazon rainforest. By comparison, in 2010, there were only about 5 billion mobile phones in the entire world. Each nerve cell can be connected to up to 10,000 others, so at any moment, the brain's neurons are communicating across 100 trillion connections by way of fizzing electrochemical reactions. The brain controls all our body's functions, including digestion, respiration, and reproduction. We can focus our attention on any task we want to, while our brains silently undertake countless other duties. Without us giving it a thought, our hearts beat, our lungs inflate, and our stomachs churn over our most recent meal. Yet consciousness is usually experienced as a unified whole. How the mind emerges from the brain's breathtaking complexity remains a complete mystery. What one philosopher in the 17th century disparagingly referred to as a bowl of curds is now considered to be the most elaborate object in the known universe. The story of how we embarked on the mission to uncover its secrets is the subject of this series. In 1865, in Peru, an American cultural attaché called Ephraim George Squire was given a strange skull. A small square hole had been cut into its frontal bone, just above the right eye socket, apparently with the use of a sharp instrument. The skull was known to have come from an ancient Inca burial ground. But who had made the hole, and why? Squire took the skull to Paris to show to the world's leading authority on the brain, Paul Broca. Broca concluded that the owner of the skull had been subjected to a procedure known as trepanation. Today, Broca is remembered for locating the region of the brain that controls speech. But he wrote more on trepanation than he did on the localization of language. Operations to remove a small piece of bone from the skull, normally undertaken to relieve the pressure caused by the build-up of fluid, have been performed by surgeons for hundreds of years. In the 10th century, for example, a trepan cured the Prince Bishop of Cologne's intolerable headaches and saved his life. The hole allowed stinking pus that had built up following an ear infection to drain out from his skull. Peter Bruegel the Elder's 1568 painting, Cutting Out the Stone of Madness, depicts an unruly asylum where patients are subjected to rather chaotic trepanning procedures. It's around this time that the introduction of brace drills and circular bits made it easier to penetrate the hard bone of the skull. By the 17th century, a trepanation kit was an essential piece of equipment for British Navy surgeons. Broca pointed out that there were no unusual cracks anywhere on Squire's skull that would indicate injury, so he reasoned that the operation had been performed on a skull undamaged by any weapon or accident.
To trepan on an apparent fracture at the bottom of a wound is a sufficiently simple conception, and does not necessitate the existence of advanced surgical arts. But here, the trepanning was performed on a point where there was no fracture, and probably not even a wound, so that the surgical act was preceded by a diagnosis. Whether this diagnosis was correct, as is probable, or false, we are in either case authorized to conclude that there was, in Peru, before the European era, a surgery already very advanced.
Broca was an admirer of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, which had only recently hinted that modern humans had ancient origins. So the hypothesis that prehistoric peoples apparently practiced brain surgery was fashionably provocative. Before long, perforated skulls were being discovered across Europe, from Scotland to Italy, from Portugal to Russia. In 1884, an archaeological dig in France uncovered numerous prehistoric...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?